"Get your filthy hands off my armrest." The woman in the designer dress didn't even look at Marcus Johnson when she said it. She just grabbed a napkin, wiped the leather where his elbow had touched, and dropped it on the floor like garbage. Marcus said nothing. He just pulled his 7-year-old daughter closer and kept his eyes forward. But 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, when both engines caught fire and the captain's voice cracked through the intercom, begging for anyone who could fly a fighter jet, that same woman would be clutching Marcus's arm, sobbing, begging the filthy man to save her life. She had no idea she was sitting next to a ghost. A man the military said died in combat 6 years ago. Comment your city below. Let me know how far this story travels. Marcus Johnson had learned to become invisible. Not the kind of invisible that superheroes dream about. The kind that happens when people look right through you. When your presence is acknowledged only as an inconvenience. When your existence is tolerated but never welcomed. He had mastered it, perfected it, made peace with it. Or at least he thought he had. "Daddy, why is that lady staring at us?" Zoe's voice was quiet. Curious. Not afraid, not yet. She was only 7. She hadn't learned to read the particular kind of hatred that lived in certain people's eyes. The kind that smiled while it cut you. Marcus squeezed her small hand. "She's not staring, baby girl. She's just looking around. People do that on airplanes." It was a lie. He knew it. But some lies were necessary. Some lies were the only armor a father could give his daughter against a world that had already decided what she was worth based on the color of her skin. The woman across the aisle, blonde mid-40s, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months, was absolutely staring. She had been staring since Marcus and Zoe had walked into the business class cabin. Her name was Victoria Ashford. Marcus didn't know that yet. He would learn it later in circumstances neither of them could have imagined. For now she was just another face. Another pair of eyes that looked at him and saw something less than human. Victoria turned to the man beside her husband Gerald, a hedge fund manager with a permanent expression of mild disgust, and whispered something behind her manicured hand. They both laughed. Marcus heard the words anyway. He had spent enough years in combat to develop hearing that could pick up a whispered conversation across a room. Probably used points. Or maybe they made a mistake with the booking. There's no way he actually paid for business class. He felt his jaw tighten. His hand, the one not holding Zoe's, curled into a fist against his thigh. Easy. Easy. You promised her. You promised Denise. His wife's name still hit him like a bullet. 2 years since the cancer took her. 2 years of raising Zoe alone. 2 years of learning how to braid hair and pack lunches and answer questions about why mommy wasn't coming home. 2 years of keeping a promise. No more fighting Marcus. Promise me. When I'm gone, you put down the warrior. You pick up the father. You let the anger go. He had held her hand in that hospital room and sworn on everything he loved that he would never raise his fist in anger again. That he would walk away from every confrontation. That he would teach Zoe peace, not war. So far, he had kept that promise. But God, some days it was hard. The flight attendant approached with a practiced smile. Young, professional, nervous. "Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry, but there seems to be some confusion with your seating assignment. Would you mind coming with me for a moment?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. He knew what was coming. He had been here before. "My ticket says 4A and 4B, he said quietly. "Business class. I have the confirmation right here." He pulled out his phone, showed her the email. The flight attendant's smile flickered. "Yes, I see that, sir. It's just that there may have been an error in the system. We're trying to sort it out." "An error?" "Yes, sir." Victoria Ashford's voice cut through like a knife. "Is there a problem?" "Because some of us are trying to prepare for important meetings in London. We don't need disruptions." She didn't look at Marcus when she said it. She looked at the flight attendant. As if Marcus wasn't there. As if he was a problem to be discussed in the third person. Marcus stood slowly. He was 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle that hadn't softened despite 3 years out of the military. When he stood, people noticed. They always noticed. The flight attendant took a small step back. "Listen," Marcus said, his voice calm. Too calm. The voice he used to use before kicking down doors in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. "My daughter and I are sitting in these seats. We paid for these seats. We're not moving from these seats. Is that clear?" Victoria scoffed. Paid with what? And there it was, out in the open. The thing they were all thinking but pretending not to say. Marcus turned to face her. Slowly. Deliberately. "Excuse me." Victoria didn't flinch. Women like her never flinched. They had never had to. Their entire lives had taught them that the world would rearrange itself around their comfort. "I'm just curious," she said, examining her nails as if the conversation bored her. Business class tickets on transatlantic flights cost $8,000. Minimum. You show up in clothes from, where exactly? Target, Walmart. And we're supposed to believe you legitimately purchased these seats. Gerald chuckled. "Vicky, be nice." "I am being nice. I'm simply asking a question." Zoe tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, what's happening?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, at her big brown eyes, at the fear that was starting to creep in around the edges, at the confusion of a child who didn't understand why adults were being cruel for no reason. And he made a choice. He knelt down right there in the aisle, so his eyes were level with hers. "Nothing's happening, baby girl. Some people are just confused, that's all. We're gonna sit down, watch some movies, eat some snacks, and before you know it, we'll be in London looking at Big Ben. Okay?" Zoe nodded. "Okay, Daddy." He stood back up, turned to the flight attendant. "We'll be taking our seats now." He guided Zoe past Victoria Ashford without another word, without another glance. He helped his daughter into the window seat, made sure her seatbelt was fastened, and pulled out the tablet he had loaded with her favorite movies. Behind him, he heard Victoria whisper to Gerald, "Unbelievable. They'll let anyone in here now." Marcus closed his eyes, breathed, counted to 10. "You promised her. You promised Denise." He kept counting. "Daddy, who was that lady talking about 45 minutes into the flight?" Zoe had her headphones off. The question Marcus had been dreading. "Nobody, sweetheart. Just forget about it." But she said, "I know what she said." Too sharp. He saw Zoe's face fall, and the guilt hit him instantly. "I'm sorry, baby girl. I didn't mean to snap at you. Come here." He lifted the armrest between their seats and pulled her close. She curled into his side like she always did, like she had since she was 3 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. "Some people," Marcus said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "look at other people and make judgments. They decide who's good and who's bad, who belongs and who doesn't, based on things that don't matter, like how much money someone has, or what color their skin is, or what kind of clothes they wear. That's not fair. No, it's not. Did she think bad things about us because we're black?" The question hit him in the chest. She was 7 years old, and she already knew. She already understood. This was the part of parenting that no one prepared you for. The part where you had to explain a broken world to a child who still believed in fairness. "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "Some people are like that. They can't see past what's on the outside to find out who someone really is on the inside." "But that's dumb." Despite everything, Marcus laughed. "Yeah, baby girl, it is dumb. Mommy used to say that what matters is your heart and your actions, not your face or your clothes." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Denise. Even now, even gone, she was still teaching their daughter, still guiding them both. "Your mommy was the smartest person I ever knew. Smarter than you. Way smarter than me." Zoe giggled. Then, after a pause, "Daddy? That lady's dress was ugly anyway." Marcus covered his mouth to hide his smile. Zoe, that's not nice. But it's true. She looked like a crayon melted on her. This time, Marcus couldn't hold back the laugh. He hugged his daughter tighter, buried his face in her braids, and for a moment, just a moment, forgot about Victoria Ashford and Gerald and all the whispers and stares. For a moment, it was just him and Zoe. The way it had been for 2 years. The way it would be for as long as he drew breath. 3 hours into the flight. Somewhere over the North Atlantic. Marcus had finally relaxed. Zoe was asleep against his shoulder, the tablet still clutched in her small hands, earbuds tangled in her braids. He had pulled a blanket over her and was staring out the window at the endless expanse of clouds below. He thought about London, about the whole reason they were on this flight, the funeral. Colonel James Wright, the man who had recruited Marcus into the Air Force at 17, who had seen something in a kid from the south side of Chicago that no one else had seen, who had pushed him, challenged him, broken him down, and built him back up into something extraordinary. Colonel Wright was the closest thing to a father Marcus had ever known. His biological father had left before Marcus could walk. His mother had done her best working 2 jobs keeping food on the table, but she couldn't teach him how to be a man. Couldn't show him what strength really looked like. Colonel Wright had done that, had shown Marcus that real strength wasn't about violence. It was about discipline, control, knowing when to fight and when to walk away. The most dangerous man in any room is the one with nothing to prove, son. Remember that. Marcus had remembered. He had carried those words through 12 years of service, through missions he couldn't talk about, through combat decorations he kept in a shoebox in his closet, through a military career that had ended quietly without ceremony the day Denise was diagnosed. Now Colonel Wright was dead. Heart attack, quick, clean, the kind of death the old soldier would have wanted. And Marcus was flying to London to say goodbye. He had thought about not going. The tickets were expensive. Business class had been a splurge using points he had accumulated over years of military flights, combined with every dollar he had saved. He couldn't really afford it. But Zoe had never been to Europe, and Colonel Wright had always wanted to meet her, and Marcus had thought it would be something good, something positive, a chance to show Zoe the world outside their small apartment, a chance to honor a man who had given him everything. Instead, it was this. Whispers, stares. A woman with a designer dress and an ugly heart making his daughter feel small. Was this what his life was now? Working as an aircraft maintenance technician at O'Hare, making just enough to keep the lights on and food in the fridge, spending his days off, teaching Zoe how to ride a bike and helping her with homework and pretending that he didn't miss the sky. He had been somebody once. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Johnson, call sign Ghost, one of the most decorated F-22 Raptor pilots in the history of the Air Force. A man whose skills had been classified, whose missions had been erased from official records, whose enemies had learned to fear a shadow they could never catch. Now he fixed planes instead of flying them, changed into coveralls every morning, came home smelling like jet fuel and sweat, and let women like Victoria Ashford look at him like he was dirt. This is the life you chose, he reminded himself. This is the promise you made. And he didn't regret it. Not for a second. Because the alternative, continuing to fly combat missions, spending months away from home, missing Zoe's childhood, the way he had missed the last 2 years of Denise's life, that was unthinkable. He would take every whisper, every stare, every casual cruelty, for her, for Zoe, for the promise. Excuse me. Excuse me, sir. Sir. Marcus snapped back to attention. A flight attendant, different from the one before, older, more senior, was leaning over him. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. I'm sorry to wake you, but I wasn't sleeping. What's wrong? He knew something was wrong. He could feel it. After 12 years in the military, you developed a sense for danger. A sixth sense that activated before your conscious mind caught up. The flight attendant's eyes were wide, too wide. Sir, I need you to come with me. Right now. It's urgent. Marcus looked at Zoe, still sleeping. "I can't leave my daughter." "Please, sir. I'll have someone stay with her. But you need to come. Now." Something in her voice made Marcus stand. Some combination of fear and desperation that he had heard before in very different circumstances. "What's happening?" The flight attendant glanced around, lowered her voice. "The captain asked me to find you specifically. He said you're the only one who can help." Marcus felt cold. "How does the captain know who I am?" "I don't know, sir. I just know that he's been on the passenger manifest, and he found something, and now he's asking for you by name. Please, we don't have much time." She was already walking toward the front of the plane. Marcus hesitated for one more second, looking at Zoe. Then he followed. The cockpit door was open. That was wrong. That was very, very wrong. Marcus had spent enough time around aircraft to know that cockpit doors stayed locked during flight. Always, no exceptions. Post 9/11 protocols were absolute. And yet there it was. Open. A flight attendant standing guard, her face ash gray. Inside, Marcus could hear voices. Strained, panicked. He stepped through the door. What he saw stopped him cold. Captain Arthur Morrison was in the left seat. Mid-50s, experienced. Calm under pressure, Marcus could tell by the set of his shoulders the steadiness of his hands. The first officer's seat was empty. A man was on the floor, unconscious, two flight attendants trying to loosen his tie. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and the instrument panel. Marcus felt his stomach drop through the floor. Multiple warning lights. Amber and red flashing in patterns he recognized all too well. Engine temperature warnings, hydraulic pressure alerts, electrical system failures, and outside the cockpit windows, clouds, dark clouds, the kind that held lightning and wind shear and everything a pilot dreaded. Captain Morrison turned and saw Marcus. "You're him, aren't you, Ghost?" Marcus said nothing. "I was stationed at Langley 15 years ago," Morrison continued. "I remember you. Watched you land an F-22 with half a wing missing after taking fire over Syria. They called it the greatest piece of flying in the history of the Air Force. Said no one else could have done it. That was a long time ago. A skill like that doesn't go away." Morrison's voice cracked just barely. "I need you, Colonel. My first officer collapsed. Food poisoning or something worse. We've got electrical failures cascading through the system. Engine 2 is overheating, and we're about to fly into the worst storm I've seen in 30 years. Marcus shook his head. "I'm retired. 3 years. I'm not rated on this aircraft." "You're rated on aircraft that travel at twice the speed of sound and can dogfight while pulling 9 Gs. You can handle a 777. It's not the same." "No, it's not. It's easier." Morrison met his eyes. "I can fly this plane, Colonel. Under normal circumstances, I can land it with my eyes closed. But these aren't normal circumstances. I need someone in that right seat who won't panic, who's seen worse than this and survived, who can keep me focused when everything goes to hell." Marcus looked at the first officer on the floor, at the warning lights, at the darkness gathering outside the windows. He thought about Zoe, sleeping in her seat, trusting him to keep her safe. He thought about Denise, about the promise. No more fighting Marcus. Put down the warrior. Pick up the father. But this wasn't fighting. This was protecting. There was a difference. "Wasn't there, how many people on this plane?" Marcus asked. 214 passengers, 12 crew. 226 souls, including his daughter. Marcus took a deep breath. Then he slid into the first officer's seat. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Victoria Ashford lowered her champagne glass. Something in the captain's voice made her pause. A tightness, a strain that hadn't been there during the welcome announcement. "We're experiencing some unexpected weather conditions and minor technical adjustments. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin and take your seats." Victoria looked at Gerald. "Technical adjustments, what does that mean?" Gerald shrugged. Probably nothing. They always overreact. But Victoria noticed the flight attendants moving quickly. Too quickly. Their faces tight. Professional smiles gone. Something was wrong. Across the aisle, the little black girl, the one who belonged to that man, was stirring. Looking around, confused. "Daddy?" She called out, her voice small. "Daddy, where are you?" Victoria looked away. Not her problem. But somewhere in a part of her heart she had walled off decades ago, something stirred. Something that looked at that frightened child and felt, "What?" She pushed it down. Whatever it was, she didn't have time for it. In the cockpit, Marcus was running through checklists like he had never stopped flying. Engine 2 temperature at redline. We need to reduce thrust. I know, Morrison said through gritted teeth. But we reduce thrust, we lose altitude. We lose altitude in this storm, we're dead. We blow an engine, we're also dead. Pick your poison, Captain. Morrison made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You know, you're exactly like I remember. Calm as ice while everything burns. I'm not calm. I'm just good at pretending. Marcus studied the instruments. What's our fuel situation? 4 hours worth. Nearest diversion airport is Shannon, 2 hours away, if we can stay in the air that long. We'll stay in the air. Marcus wasn't sure if he believed it, but he said it anyway. Sometimes the lie was necessary. What happened to your first officer? Collapsed about 20 minutes ago, complaining about stomach pain, then just dropped. The flight attendants think it's food poisoning, but I've never seen it hit that fast. Allergic reaction, maybe. Some kind of anaphylaxis? Maybe. Does he have an EpiPen? Already gave him one. He's stable but unconscious. Not getting up anytime soon. Marcus nodded. He had seen men go down in worse conditions. In combat. In training exercises that went sideways. You adapted. You overcame. You didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Talk me through this aircraft, he said. I know the basics, but I need specifics. Everything that's different from what I'm used to. Morrison started explaining. Fly-by-wire systems. Automated thrust control. Glass cockpit displays. Marcus absorbed it all, filing it away, building a mental model of an aircraft he had never flown. He had 4 hours to learn how to fly a 777. 226 lives depended on it. 45 minutes later, the storm hit. It wasn't like turbulence. Turbulence was uncomfortable, annoying, something passengers complained about over drinks after landing. This was violence. The aircraft bucked like a living thing, trying to throw off its riders. Lightning split the sky so close that Marcus could feel the static electricity on his skin. Rain lashed the windscreen with such force that visibility dropped to 0. And somewhere in the cabin, people were screaming. Marcus tuned it out. He had learned how to do that a long time ago. Focus on the task. Block out everything else. Altitude dropping, he called out. 3,000 feet in 30 seconds. I see it. Morrison was wrestling with the controls. The autopilot can't handle this. I'm switching to manual. Do it. The captain disconnected the autopilot. The aircraft immediately felt different, more alive, more responsive, but also more dangerous. Now it was just 2 men against the storm. Coming up on engine 2 flame-out parameters, Marcus said. If the temperature spikes any higher, a deafening bang cut him off. The aircraft lurched violently to the right. Warning alarms screamed. The instrument panel lit up like a Christmas tree from hell. Engine 2 just failed, Marcus announced. We're down to 1 engine. Morrison's face went white. Can we maintain altitude? Marcus ran the calculations in his head. Weight, thrust, drag, fuel consumption. Not at this altitude. We need to descend to 25,000 feet. That'll reduce the strain on engine 1 and give us a chance. If we descend, we stay in the storm longer. If we don't descend, we lose the second engine and we fall out of the sky. Which would you prefer? Morrison made his decision. Descending to 25,000. Call it out. 30,000. 29. 28. Marcus watched the altimeter unwind, calling out each 1,000-foot increment as the aircraft dropped through the roiling clouds. Lightning flashed. Thunder shook the airframe. And somehow, impossibly, they kept flying. "What's happening? What's happening?" Victoria's voice was a shriek. The calm, composed CEO had vanished. In her place was a terrified woman gripping her armrest so hard her knuckles were white. Gerald had gone silent. His face was green. He looked like he might be sick. The cabin was chaos. Oxygen masks had dropped from the ceiling. Passengers were crying, praying, screaming. A businessman 2 rows back was reciting the Lord's Prayer in a language Victoria didn't recognize. And through it all she could hear the little girl. "Daddy! Daddy! Where are you?" Zoe. Johnson was standing in the aisle, tears streaming down her face, looking for her father who had disappeared. Something broke in Victoria. She didn't know why. She didn't understand it. But in that moment, watching that terrified child call for a father who wasn't there, she felt something shift inside her chest. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "Victoria, what are you doing?" Gerald grabbed at her arm. "Sit down." She shook him off, pushed past him, stumbled through the lurching cabin until she reached the little girl. "Hey!" She knelt down, grabbed Zoe's shoulders. "Hey! Look at me!" Zoe looked up, tears and confusion in her eyes. "Where's my daddy? I want my daddy." "I know, sweetheart, I know, but right now I need you to be brave, okay? I need you to come sit with me until your daddy comes back." "I don't want to sit with you. I want my daddy." I know. Victoria felt tears burning in her own eyes. When was the last time she had cried? She couldn't remember. "But your daddy is helping the pilots right now. He's making sure we all stay safe. And the best thing you can do to help him is to stay in your seat with your seatbelt on. Can you do that?" Zoe wiped her eyes. "My daddy is helping the pilots." "Yes, sweetheart. Your daddy is a hero." The words came out before Victoria could stop them. And as she said them, she realized they were true. The man she had mocked, the man she had looked down upon, the man whose mere presence had offended her. He was somewhere in that cockpit, fighting to keep them all alive, while she had been sipping champagne and judging his clothes. "Shannon, this is Flight 789. Mayday, mayday, mayday." Marcus's voice was steady over the radio. He had made this call before in different circumstances, different skies, but the weight was the same. "We have 1 engine failure, partial hydraulic loss, and significant electrical degradation. We're requesting emergency vectors to Shannon and priority landing clearance." The radio crackled. "Flight 789 Shannon approach. Copy your mayday. We're clearing all traffic. Emergency services are standing by. What's your current status?" "Maintaining 24,000 feet on 1 engine, 214 passengers, 12 crew, 1 crew member incapacitated. We're going to need medical on the ground." "Copy 789. You're cleared for direct Shannon. Turn right, heading 045, and good luck." Marcus clicked off the radio and looked at Morrison. 90 minutes to go. Can we make it?" Morrison's jaw was set. His hands were steady on the controls. Whatever fear he felt, he wasn't showing it. "We're going to make it, because the alternative is unacceptable." Marcus nodded. That was the only kind of thinking that worked in situations like this. You didn't consider failure. You didn't allow for it. You simply decided that you would succeed, and then you made it happen. He had done it before. Over Syria. Over Afghanistan. Over places that would never appear on any official record. He would do it again. For Zoe. For everyone on this plane. For the promise he made to a dying woman who was still teaching him what it meant to be brave. 63 minutes to Shannon. Marcus watched the engine temperature gauge like a surgeon monitoring a patient's heartbeat. Every flicker, every fluctuation told a story. And right now, the story was not good. "Engine 1 is running hot," he said. "We're pushing it too hard." Morrison didn't take his eyes off the windscreen. "We push it any less, we don't make it to Shannon." We push it any more, we lose the second engine, and we definitely don't make it anywhere. So what do you suggest, Colonel? Marcus ran the numbers again. Fuel consumption, distance, wind speed. Every variable he could calculate in his head the way he used to calculate missile trajectories and evasion patterns. We lighten the load, he said finally. Dump fuel. Morrison's head snapped toward him. Dump fuel. Are you insane? We barely have enough to make it as it is. We have more than enough if we reduce our weight. Every pound we lose gives us a better glide ratio if engine 1 fails. It also reduces the strain we're putting on it right now. And if we miscalculate, if we run out before we reach the runway, then we'll have a really bad day. Marcus met his eyes. But if we blow this engine in the next 30 minutes, we won't even have that. We'll have about 90 seconds of controlled flight before we hit the Atlantic. Morrison stared at him. The captain's face was a battlefield of competing fears, each one fighting for dominance. How do you do it? Morrison asked quietly. How do you stay so calm? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. You don't look terrified. That's the training. You learn to put the fear in a box. You'll deal with it later. Right now, there's no room for it. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Outside, lightning split the sky. The aircraft shuddered. Okay, he said finally. We dump fuel. How much? 30% of what we have left. That should be enough to make a difference without putting us in the red zone. Morrison reached for the fuel dump controls. His hand was shaking. Hey, Marcus said. Captain, look at me. Morrison looked. We're going to make it. You hear me? I've been in worse situations than this. I've flown aircraft that were literally falling apart around me, and I'm still here. You know why? Why? Because I refused to die. I decided that dying wasn't an option, and I made the universe agree with me. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Today is not our day to die, Captain. Not yours, not mine, not anyone on this aircraft. Something shifted in Morrison's eyes. The fear didn't disappear, but it retreated, made room for something else, determination, resolve. Initiating fuel dump, Morrison said. 30%. Marcus watched the fuel gauges begin to drop. Somewhere behind them, jet fuel was streaming from the aircraft's wings, dispersing into the storm clouds like tears into an ocean. Lighter, faster, safer. Maybe. In the cabin, the passengers had no idea what was happening above their heads. They only knew that the plane was still shaking, still fighting, still somehow staying in the air. Victoria Ashford sat with Zoe Johnson in the seat beside her. The little girl had stopped crying, but she was holding Victoria's hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "What's your name?" Zoe asked. Victoria hesitated. It had been a long time since anyone had asked her that question without already knowing the answer. Without already having researched her net worth and her corporate history and her position on various Forbes lists. "Victoria," she said. "That's a pretty name. It sounds like a princess." "It was my grandmother's name. She was a very strong woman." "Was she nice?" The question caught Victoria off guard. Was her grandmother nice? She tried to remember, tried to dig through decades of memories to find the woman behind the legend. "She was complicated," Victoria said finally. "She loved me very much, but she wasn't always good at showing it. She thought love made you weak." "That's silly. Love doesn't make you weak. Love makes you brave." Victoria looked at this 7-year-old girl, this child she had dismissed and mocked just hours ago, and felt something crack open in her chest. "Who told you that?" "My mommy, before she went to heaven. She said love is the bravest thing there is. Because when you love someone, you're not scared anymore. You just want to keep them safe." "Your mommy sounds very wise." "She was the best mommy in the whole world." Zoe's voice wobbled slightly. "I miss her every day." Victoria felt tears burning in her eyes again. She, who never cried. She who had built an empire on the bedrock of emotional control. "I'm sure she misses you too, sweetheart." "She can't miss me. She's dead." Zoe said it matter-of-factly with the brutal honesty of childhood. "But Daddy says she's watching us from heaven. He says she sends us signs sometimes, like when we see butterflies or when the sun comes out after it rains." "That's beautiful. Do you have someone watching you from heaven?" Victoria thought about her father, about the man who had taught her that business was war and sentiment was suicide, who had died alone in a hospital room because his children were too busy with quarterly reports to visit. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm not sure anyone's watching out for me." Zoe squeezed her hand tighter. "I'll watch out for you. Until my daddy comes back. Then he can watch out for both of us." Victoria opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. Instead, she just held on to that small hand and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in years. Connection. Pure, simple, human connection. "Shannon, approach flight 789. We're encountering severe wind shear. Request updated weather." The radio crackled with static before the controller's voice came through. 789 Shannon, approach. Weather at the field is deteriorating. Winds gusting to 45 knots, heavy rain visibility down to half a mile. We're considering closing the runway. Marcus and Morrison exchanged glances. Closing the runway. The worst possible news. "Shannon, we don't have an alternative," Marcus said into the radio. "Our fuel state won't get us anywhere else. We need that runway." 789 understand. "We're keeping it open for you, but I won't lie. It's going to be ugly. What's your experience level?" Morrison took the radio. "Shannon, this is Captain Arthur Morrison. 25 years commercial, former military transport. I've got Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Johnson in the right seat, former F-22 pilot Air Force." A pause. Then, "Did you say Marcus Johnson, call sign Ghost?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Affirmative." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "Colonel Johnson, this is Approach Controller Sergeant Patrick O'Brien. I served with the Irish Air Corps. Did some joint exercises with you boys in 2015. I remember you." "Small world, Sergeant." "Aye, it is. Listen, if you're in that cockpit, I'm a lot less worried than I was 5 minutes ago. I saw what you did at Red Flag, flew through conditions that would have killed anyone else." "That was a long time ago." "Skill like that doesn't fade, sir. You've got this. We'll guide you in. Just trust your instincts." Marcus clicked off the radio and sat back in his seat. His instincts. That's what everyone always said. Trust your instincts. As if instincts were some magical force that could overcome physics and weather and mechanical failure. But the truth was, instincts were just experience compressed into reflex. Years of training. Years of flying. Years of making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. All of it packed into a feeling in his gut that told him what to do before his conscious mind could catch up. Right now his gut was telling him they were in serious trouble. "Captain," he said, "we need to talk about approach options." "What do you mean?" "Standard ILS approach puts us on a long final. Lots of time in the wind shear zone. We're going to get kicked around." "What's the alternative?" "Carrier approach." Morrison stared at him. "A carrier approach. In a 700 W7. Modified. Steeper descent, faster approach, speed, shorter final. Get us through the worst of the weather as quickly as possible." "That's not in any manual." "No, it's not. But I've done it before. Different aircraft, same principle. We come in high and fast dump speed at the last minute planted on the runway. It's ugly, but it works. And if it doesn't work, then we try something else." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. The aircraft bucked again, caught in another gust of wind. Warning lights flickered. "You really think this will work?" "I think it gives us the best chance. But it's your aircraft, Captain. Your call." Morrison looked at the instruments. At the storm raging outside. At the single engine that was keeping 226 people alive. Then he looked at Marcus. "Tell me what to do." The next 30 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He talked Morrison through every step of the approach: speed adjustments, flap settings, descent rates. Every detail that would normally be automatic now had to be calculated and recalculated based on their degraded systems. "Crosswind from the right 15 knots, Marcus called out. "Compensate with 5 degrees left crab angle. 5 degrees left copy. Airspeed 140, we're 10 knots fast. Reduce thrust." Reducing thrust. "Careful. Don't pull it back too much. Engine 1 is our only friend right now." Morrison's hands moved on the throttle with surgical precision. The man was good, Marcus had to admit. 25 years of experience showed in every movement, every adjustment. But experience could only take you so far. At some point you needed something else. Call it luck. Call it fate. Call it the universe deciding that today was not your day to die. Marcus called it faith. Faith in himself. Faith in the aircraft. Faith in the promise he had made to a dying woman that he would always come home to their daughter. 10 miles to runway. The radio crackled. 789, you're cleared to land. Emergency services standing by. Wind is 310 at 35 gusting 50. It's now or never, gentlemen. Copy, Shannon. We're committed. Marcus looked out the windscreen. Nothing but gray. Rain so heavy it looked like they were flying through a waterfall. Somewhere ahead, hidden in that maelstrom, was a runway. 5 miles. Altitude 2,000. Descent rate on profile. "I can't see anything," Morrison said. His voice was tight. "You don't need to see. Trust the instruments. Trust me. 3 miles, 1,000 feet. Decision altitude coming up. Still nothing. I don't have the runway. Keep descending. It's there. If it's not, it's there. 2 miles, 500 feet. Stay on the glide path." Morrison's knuckles were white on the controls. Sweat ran down his face. The aircraft was shaking so hard that Marcus could barely read the instruments. And then through the rain, through the chaos, through the storm that had tried so hard to kill them, lights. Runway lights. "I have the runway," Morrison shouted. "Take it. You've got this." Morrison pushed the nose down, aiming for those beautiful life-saving lights. The ground rushed up to meet them. The aircraft shuddered as they passed through the last layer of wind shear. Too fast. They were coming in too fast. "Speed brakes!" Marcus shouted. "Full speed brakes!" Morrison yanked the lever. The aircraft groaned as drag plates extended from the wings, fighting against momentum and gravity, and everything else that wanted to see them dead. The main gear hit the runway with a bone-jarring impact. The nose slammed down a second later. Marcus was thrown forward against his harness as Morrison stood on the brakes. The aircraft screamed down the runway, rain spraying from the tires, emergency lights flashing on both sides. For a horrible moment, Marcus was certain they wouldn't stop in time. That they would run off the end of the runway and into whatever lay beyond. But inch by inch, foot by foot, the aircraft slowed. And stopped. Silence. Perfect, beautiful silence. Morrison's hands fell from the controls. His head dropped forward. "We made it," he whispered. "We actually made it." Marcus sat back in his seat and closed his eyes. His whole body was shaking. The adrenaline that had kept him functioning for the past 2 hours was draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion and overwhelming relief. "Yeah," he said. "We did." The cabin erupted when the passengers realized they were on the ground. Crying, screaming, cheering, strangers hugging strangers. People who had spent the flight ignoring each other, suddenly clinging together like long-lost family. Victoria Ashford sat motionless. Zoe's hand still in hers, tears streaming down her face. "We're okay," Zoe asked. "We're okay, sweetheart. We're on the ground. I told you my daddy would save us." Victoria laughed through her tears. "You did. You absolutely did." Around them, the emergency evacuation was beginning. Flight attendants directing passengers toward the exits. Slides deploying. Emergency vehicles visible through the windows, their lights cutting through the rain. But Victoria didn't move. She couldn't. Something had happened to her during those terrifying hours. Something had shifted, rearranged, broken, and reformed. She thought about her life. Her beautiful, empty life. The penthouse apartment with no one to come home to. The awards and accolades that hung on walls no one ever saw. The success that tasted like ashes in her mouth. She had spent 45 years climbing. Always climbing. Higher and higher, leaving everyone behind, convinced that the view from the top would be worth the loneliness of the journey. But the view from the top was just more emptiness. More isolation. More of the same desperate hunger that had driven her since childhood. And now, sitting in a crashed airplane with a 7-year-old girl holding her hand, she understood something she had never understood before. The climb was the wrong goal. It had always been the wrong goal. The goal was connection. Love. The small, precious moments of human contact that made life worth living. Everything else was just noise. Marcus emerged from the cockpit to chaos. Passengers were crowding the aisles, some trying to evacuate, others frozen in shock. Flight attendants were shouting instructions. Emergency responders were already boarding through the forward doors. And somewhere in that mess was his daughter. "Zoe!" he shouted, pushing through the crowd. "Zoe, where are you?" "Daddy!" He saw her face appear in the sea of people, her eyes wide, her arms reaching for him. And he moved without thinking, shoving past everyone in his way, driven by nothing but the need to hold his child. She slammed into him with the force of a small hurricane. He caught her, lifted her, crushed her against his chest so hard that she squeaked. "I knew you'd save us," she said into his shoulder. "I told everyone. I told the lady. I said my daddy would save us." "I'm here, baby girl. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He held her for a long moment, just breathing her in. The strawberry shampoo in her hair. The warmth of her small body. The weight of her in his arms that had become the only weight that mattered. When he finally looked up, he saw Victoria Ashford standing a few feet away. She looked different. Smaller somehow. Broken open. The armor of wealth and arrogance that had surrounded her was gone, stripped away by hours of terror and the simple truth of near death. "She talked about you the whole time," Victoria said. Her voice was hoarse. She never doubted. Not for a second. Marcus didn't know what to say. This woman had looked at him like he was dirt. Had made his daughter feel small and unwanted. Had represented everything he hated about a world that judged people by their appearance and their bank accounts. And yet here she was, tears on her face, something shattered in her eyes, looking at him not with contempt, but with something that might have been shame. "Thank you," she said, "for saving us, for saving me, even though I didn't deserve it." "Everyone deserves to live," Marcus said. "No, that's not what I mean." Victoria took a shaky breath. "I mean, thank you for showing me what I've been missing, what I've been throwing away my whole life." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He thought about all the things he could say, all the anger he could express, all the righteous condemnation he had earned the right to deliver. But he thought about Denise instead, about what she would do, about the grace and forgiveness that had defined her entire existence. "We all miss things," he said finally. "The important thing is what we do when we finally see them." Victoria nodded. More tears fell. She made no move to wipe them away. "Your daughter," she said. "She told me that love makes you brave. I think I'd like to learn how to be brave, if it's not too late." "It's never too late." Zoe tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, can Victoria come with us? She doesn't have anyone to watch out for her." Marcus looked at his daughter. At this small, fierce, loving child who somehow still believed in the goodness of people. Who still thought that everyone deserved a chance, just like her mother. "We'll see, baby girl," he said. "We'll see." The evacuation took another hour. Marcus stayed with the flight crew, helping to coordinate the medical response, talking to investigators, doing everything that needed to be done. Captain Morrison refused to leave his side, introducing him to everyone as the man who had saved the plane. Marcus deflected the praise, insisted that Morrison had done the actual flying, that he had just been a voice in the captain's ear. But Morrison wasn't having it. "I've been flying for 25 years, he told the lead investigator. "I've been through emergencies before, but nothing like this. If Colonel Johnson hadn't been on that plane, if he hadn't had the experience and the calm and the pure skill to talk me through it, we'd all be dead. I was just doing what needed to be done," Marcus said. "That's the definition of a hero son." The investigator, an older man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, looked at Marcus with something like respect. "You don't get to decide whether you're a hero or not. The people you save decide that for you." Marcus had no response to that. They put the passengers in a hotel near the airport, gave them food, gave them rooms, gave them phones to call their loved ones. Marcus called no one. There was no one to call. His mother had passed 5 years ago. He had no siblings. His military friends had scattered to the winds. The only person who mattered was right beside him, falling asleep in a too-large hotel bed, exhausted from the most terrifying day of her young life. He sat in a chair by the window, watching the rain continue to fall on Shannon, Ireland. A place he had never been. A place he had never expected to be. Zoe's voice came from the bed, sleepy and small. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby girl. Were you scared?" He thought about lying, about protecting her from the truth. But Zoe deserved better than that. She always had. "Yeah, sweetheart. I was scared. But you did it anyway. I did it because of you. Because I had to keep you safe. That's what daddies do." "That's what Mommy said. She said you were the bravest man she ever knew." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "She said that..." "Uh-huh. Before she went to heaven, she said, 'Your daddy is going to take care of you, and you're going to take care of him, because that's what family does.'" Family. The word hit him like a punch to the chest. He had been so focused on being a father, on keeping his promise, on making sure Zoe had everything she needed. But he had forgotten that he needed her too, that the relationship wasn't one-directional, that in taking care of her, she was also taking care of him. He got up from the chair and lay down beside her on the bed. She curled into him immediately, her small body fitting against his like a puzzle piece finding its home. "I love you, baby girl. I love you too, Daddy. To the moon and back. To the moon and back." She was asleep within minutes. Marcus stayed awake, listening to her breathe, watching the rain streak down the window, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Tomorrow, there would be reporters, investigators, people who wanted to turn him into something he wasn't, a hero, a symbol, a story. But tonight, there was just this, a father and daughter safe and warm together. And that was enough. That was everything. Victoria Ashford did not sleep that night. She sat in her own hotel room, staring at walls she didn't see, replaying the events of the day over and over in her mind. She thought about the moment the engine exploded, the moment she realized she might die, the moment all her money and power and success meant absolutely nothing. She thought about Zoe Johnson holding her hand in the chaos, offering comfort to a woman who had offered her nothing but contempt. She thought about Marcus Johnson walking into that cockpit, putting his life on the line for people who had treated him like garbage. And she thought about herself, about who she had become, about the cold, bitter, lonely person she saw in the mirror every morning. Her phone had been buzzing for hours. Messages from her assistant, from her board of directors, from media outlets wanting interviews, from her ex-husband, who had probably seen the news and wanted to make sure his stock options weren't affected by her potential death. She ignored all of it. Instead, she called a number she hadn't called in 15 years. Her sister. The one she had cut out of her life because she had married a schoolteacher and moved to Vermont and chosen happiness over success. The phone rang 3 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Hello? Karen, it's me. It's Victoria." A long pause. "Victoria, is something wrong? It's 3 in the morning." "I know. I'm sorry. Victoria's voice broke. "I almost died today, and I realized that if I had died, you wouldn't even have known. We haven't spoken in 15 years, and you wouldn't have known." Silence on the other end. Then softly, "I saw the news. About the plane. I didn't know you were on it." "I was. And I almost didn't make it. And all I could think about was how stupid I've been. How much time I've wasted. How many people I've pushed away." "Victoria." "I'm sorry, Karen. I'm so sorry. For everything. For missing your wedding. For missing your kids' birthdays. For acting like I was better than you because I had money and you didn't." The tears were flowing freely now. "I'm not better. I'm worse. I'm so much worse." Another pause. Then, impossibly, a sound that might have been a laugh. "You really almost died, didn't you?" "Yes." "And it took that to make you pick up the phone?" "Yes." "Well?" Karen's voice softened. "Better late than never, I suppose. It's good to hear your voice, Vicky. It really is." Victoria sobbed. She hadn't been called Vicky since she was 12 years old. "Can I come visit?" she asked. "After London. After I sort things out. Can I come to Vermont and meet your kids and just be your sister again? You were always my sister. You just forgot for a while." They talked for an hour, catching up on 15 years, laughing at old memories, crying over missed opportunities. By the time they hung up, something had healed, something small but real. Victoria set down her phone and looked out the window at the rain. Tomorrow there would be decisions to make, a life to rebuild, bridges to repair. But tonight, she had made a start. And maybe that was enough. The morning came too fast. Marcus woke to the sound of his phone buzzing on the nightstand. He reached for it without opening his eyes. Muscle memory from years of being on call, years of missions that started with a phone vibrating in the darkness. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages. His voicemail was full. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake Zoe, and scrolled through the notifications. News outlets, former military contacts he hadn't heard from in years, numbers he didn't recognize, and one message from an address he did recognize, the funeral home in London. "Mr. Johnson, we understand you were delayed due to the emergency landing. Colonel Wright's service has been postponed until tomorrow to accommodate your arrival. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. In all the chaos, he had almost forgotten why they were making this trip in the first place. Colonel Wright, the funeral, the goodbye he had been dreading for weeks. He got out of bed and walked to the window. Ireland was gray and wet, the rain from last night having settled into a persistent drizzle. Somewhere out there on a runway he couldn't see sat the aircraft that had almost become their coffin. His phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Colonel Johnson, this is Captain Morrison. The airline has arranged transport to London for all passengers. Your flight leaves at 1400. I hope you and your daughter are well. It was an honor to fly with you." Marcus typed back a simple response. "The honor was mine, Captain. Thank you for not giving up." He was about to put the phone down when another message came through. A number he didn't know. "Mr. Johnson, this is Victoria Ashford. I got your number from the airline's passenger coordination team. I hope that's not inappropriate. I wanted to apologize again properly when you have time. And I wanted to thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for what your daughter taught me. She's remarkable. You've raised her well." Marcus read the message twice. He thought about ignoring it, about leaving this woman in his past where she belonged. But Zoe's voice echoed in his head. She doesn't have anyone to watch out for her. He typed back, "Thank you for looking after Zoe while I was in the cockpit. That meant everything to me. We're on the 2 p.m. flight to London if you're on the same one." The response came almost immediately. "I am. Perhaps we could talk more then, if you're willing." "We'll see." He typed and put the phone down. Zoe woke up hungry, which Marcus took as a good sign. Trauma had a way of killing appetite, and the fact that his daughter wanted pancakes meant she was processing yesterday better than he had expected. They found the hotel restaurant half full of other passengers from their flight. People nodded at Marcus as he walked past. Some stood up to shake his hand. A woman with gray hair and kind eyes pressed a rosary into his palm and told him she had been praying for him the entire time. "You're famous, Daddy," Zoe observed as they sat down at a corner table. "I'm not famous. People are just grateful." "That lady gave you her prayer beads. That's famous." Marcus smiled despite himself. "That's grateful, baby girl. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Famous is when people know your name but don't know who you are. Grateful is when people don't care about your name, they just care about what you did for them." Zoe considered this while attacking her pancakes. So which one is better? Grateful, always grateful. Fame goes away. Gratitude stays. "Did Mommy teach you that?" Marcus felt the familiar ache in his chest. "Yeah, she did." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Marcus watched his daughter marveling as he often did at how much she looked like Denise. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Are we still going to see Colonel Wright?" Marcus set down his fork. "We're going to his funeral, sweetheart. Remember Colonel Wright passed away." "I know, but you said we were going to say goodbye. So are we still going?" "Yes, we're still going. Our flight to London leaves this afternoon." "Good." Zoe nodded firmly. "Because Mommy said it's important to say goodbye properly. She said goodbyes are like doors. If you don't close them right, you can never really move forward." Marcus stared at his daughter. "When did Mommy tell you that?" "Before she went to heaven. She made me promise to always say proper goodbyes. She said she didn't want us to be stuck." The ache in his chest intensified. Denise, even at the end, had been thinking about them. About how to help them heal. About how to give them permission to move on. "Your mommy was the smartest person I ever knew," Marcus said again. "You already said that yesterday." "It's worth saying twice." The flight to London was quiet. A different aircraft, a different crew, but the same nervous energy among the passengers who had survived yesterday's ordeal. Several people had chosen not to fly, opting instead for the ferry to England, but most had decided that the odds of 2 emergency landings in a row were astronomically low. Marcus and Zoe were seated in business class again. The airline had upgraded everyone from the original flight as a gesture of goodwill. This time, no one looked at them strangely. This time people smiled and nodded and gave them space. Victoria Ashford was 3 rows ahead alone, staring out the window at nothing. "She looks sad," Zoe observed. "She probably is sad. We should go talk to her." "Maybe later, sweetheart. Let her have some quiet time." "But Daddy, you said when people are sad you shouldn't leave them alone. You said Mommy taught you that too." Marcus sighed. His daughter had inherited Denise's memory for inconvenient truths. "Okay, we'll go say hello." They made their way up the aisle to Victoria's row. She looked up as they approached, and Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise. Hope. Fear. "May we sit?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the empty seats beside her. "Please." Zoe slid in first, claiming the middle seat with the proprietary air of a 7-year-old who had already decided this woman was her responsibility. Marcus took the aisle seat. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have no idea. I've been asking myself that question all morning. I think the answer is different. I feel different. Different how? Like I've been sleepwalking for 20 years and someone finally shook me awake. She looked at Zoe. Your daughter held my hand through the worst of it. Did she tell you? She mentioned it. She told me that love makes you brave. That was her mother's wisdom, apparently. Victoria's voice caught. I've been thinking about that all night, about how I've spent my entire life being afraid. Afraid of failure, afraid of weakness, afraid of anyone seeing who I really am beneath all the success and money and power. And now I think being afraid is the real failure. I think the weakness is pretending to be strong when you're not. I think the power I accumulated was just a wall to hide behind. She looked at Marcus directly. Your wife sounds like she was an extraordinary woman. She was. I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry for how I treated you on that plane. There's no excuse for it. I was cruel and ignorant and everything I claim to despise in other people. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My wife used to say that everyone is fighting a battle you can't see. She said judgment is just fear wearing a mask. When you judge someone else, you're really just afraid of what they represent, afraid of what you might have in common with them. Victoria nodded slowly. What do you think I was afraid of? I don't know. I barely know you. Take a guess. Marcus studied her face. The lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. The tension in her jaw that spoke of decades of clenched teeth. The loneliness that radiated off her like heat from a dying fire. I think you were afraid of being ordinary, he said finally. I think somewhere along the way, someone told you that ordinary was the same as worthless. That if you weren't the best, the richest, the most powerful, you didn't matter. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. My father. I figured. He used to say that second place was just the first loser. That sentiment was for people who couldn't compete. That love was a liability. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He died alone, you know, in a hospital room. None of his children were there. We were all too busy proving ourselves to visit. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made his choices. We all make our choices. She looked at Zoe, who was listening quietly. I'm sorry, sweetheart. This probably isn't appropriate conversation for someone your age. Zoe shrugged. My mommy died too. I know about sad stuff. You're very mature for 7. Daddy says I'm an old soul. Mommy said the same thing. Victoria smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I think your parents are right. They landed at Heathrow without incident. The passengers applauded when the wheels touched down, a spontaneous outburst of relief that made the flight crew smile. Outside, the aircraft chaos awaited. Media, cameras, reporters shouting questions. Marcus saw them through the jet bridge windows and felt his stomach drop. Mr. Johnson. Colonel Johnson, can we get a statement? How does it feel to be a hero? Is it true you flew combat missions in Afghanistan? Colonel Johnson over here? Marcus grabbed Zoe's hand and pulled her close. Stay with me, baby girl. Don't talk to anyone. They pushed through the crowd, Marcus using his body to shield his daughter from the crushing press of reporters. Airport security was trying to maintain order, but there were too many cameras, too many microphones, too many people who wanted a piece of the story. And then suddenly, there was Victoria. She stepped between Marcus and the reporters, her CEO presence returning like armor being strapped on. That's enough. This man and his daughter need privacy. If you have questions, you can direct them to my office. My assistant will arrange a press conference for later today. Ma'am, who are you? Victoria Ashford. Ashford Technologies. I was on that flight as well, and I can tell you firsthand that Colonel Johnson saved all of our lives. But right now, he needs to be with his daughter, not answering your questions. Show some respect. The reporters hesitated. Victoria's name carried weight even among journalists who covered aviation rather than business. They parted reluctantly, allowing Marcus and Zoe to pass. Marcus looked at Victoria as they walked through the terminal. "Thank you. Consider it a down payment on making up for yesterday." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything. But more importantly, I owe it to myself to be a different person than I was on that plane." She glanced at him. "Where are you headed?" "A hotel tonight. The funeral is tomorrow morning." "Let me help. I have a suite booked at the Langham. There's more than enough room. You and Zoe could stay there. Get some rest away from the media." Marcus started to refuse. He had spent 3 years refusing help, proving to himself and everyone else that he could handle things alone. But he looked at Zoe exhausted and overwhelmed and reconsidered. "One condition," he said. "Name it. You stop apologizing. What happened on the plane is over. You don't need to keep paying for it." Victoria smiled. "I'll try, but no promises." The Langham was the kind of hotel Marcus had never stayed in. The kind where the staff knew your name before you introduced yourself, and the sheets probably cost more than his monthly rent. Zoe fell asleep almost immediately, curled up on a bed that was bigger than her entire bedroom at home. Marcus covered her with a blanket and stepped out onto the balcony, looking out at London's grey skyline. Victoria joined him a few minutes later, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "I don't really drink," Marcus said. "Then hold it for the warmth. It's freezing out here." He took the glass. She was right. The cold was biting, carrying the promise of rain. "Tell me about Colonel Wright," Victoria said. "If you want to. Sometimes it helps to talk about the people we've lost." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He didn't usually talk about his past, didn't share the memories that lived in the locked rooms of his heart. But something about Victoria's expectant silence made him want to open those doors. "He saved my life," Marcus said finally. "Literally and figuratively. I was 17 years old, running with a gang on the south side of Chicago. My mother was working herself to death trying to keep us fed, and I was throwing it all away because I was angry. Angry at my father for leaving. Angry at the world for being unfair. Angry at everyone and everything." "What happened?" "I got arrested. Petty theft. The cops were going to throw me in juvenile detention, and I probably would have come out worse than I went in. But Colonel Wright happened to be at the station that night. Recruiting. Looking for young men who had potential but needed direction. And he saw potential in you." Marcus laughed softly. "He saw a scared kid pretending to be tough. He saw through all my posturing in about 5 seconds, pulled me aside and said, 'Boy, you've got 2 choices. You can go into that cell and become exactly what everyone expects you to become, or you can come with me and find out what you're really made of.' That's quite a recruitment pitch." He was quite a man. Marcus took a sip of wine without thinking. "He put me through hell. Basic training, then flight school, then fighter pilot training. Every step of the way I wanted to quit. Every step of the way he pushed me harder, and every time I was ready to give up, he'd look at me with those eyes of his and say, 'You're not done yet, son. You don't get to decide when you're done. I decide when you're done.'" Victoria smiled. "He sounds terrifying." He was. But he was also the first person who ever believed in me. The first person who saw something worth saving. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "When Denise got sick, he's the one who told me to leave the Air Force. He said, 'Your wife needs you more than the sky does. Go be with her.' That's an order." "That's when you retired." "Yeah, left everything behind. The career, the status, the identity I had built for 20 years. Became a maintenance technician so I could be home every night." "Do you regret it?" Marcus looked at her. "Not for a second. Those last 2 years with Denise, watching her fight, watching her love Zoe with every breath she had left. Those were the most important years of my life. I wouldn't trade them for anything." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I've never had anything I wouldn't trade. Maybe that's about to change. Maybe. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if embarrassed by the display of emotion. What happens after the funeral? Do you go back to Chicago? That's the plan. Back to work, back to normal, back to pretending I don't miss the sky every single day. But you do miss it. Every single day. Flying it's hard to explain. It was like being free in a way that nothing else could match. When you're up there, 30,000 feet above everything, all the problems on the ground seem so small, so manageable. And now I drive to work, sit in traffic-fixed planes that other people fly, and try to remember what it felt like to touch the clouds. He smiled, but it was sad. But I have Zoe, and that's worth more than any sky. She's lucky to have you. I'm luckier to have her. They stood in silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker to life as darkness fell. Two people who had nothing in common except a shared brush with death and a tentative, fragile connection that neither of them fully understood. I called my sister last night, Victoria said suddenly. We hadn't spoken in 15 years. How did it go? Better than I deserved. She's invited me to Vermont to meet her children, my nieces and nephews that I've never met. Are you going to go? I think so, after I finish sorting things out in London. Victoria turned to face him. You know, yesterday morning I had my life perfectly planned. Meetings, acquisitions, board presentations, every minute accounted for. And then the engines failed, and suddenly none of it mattered. Funny how that works. It's not funny at all. It's terrifying. All these years I thought I was building something important, something lasting. But when I thought I was going to die, I didn't think about any of it. Not the company, not the money, not the success. What did you think about? Victoria's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I thought about being 12 years old before everything got complicated. Before my father started demanding perfection. Before my mother retreated into pills and silence. I thought about riding my bike down this hill near our house, feeling the wind in my hair, laughing, because I was alive and the world was beautiful and nothing else mattered. That's a good memory. It's the last time I remember being truly happy. Not successful, not accomplished, just happy. Marcus nodded slowly. I know what you mean. Before the Air Force, before everything, I used to climb onto the roof of our apartment building and watch planes fly overhead. I'd lie there for hours, imagining where they were going, dreaming about being up there. That's why I became a pilot, not for the glory or the missions, just to chase that feeling. Did you catch it? Sometimes. On good days when everything was perfect, I'd be up there at dawn and the sun would be rising and the whole world would be gold and pink and infinite. And I'd feel it, that thing I was chasing, that sense of being exactly where I was supposed to be. And now I feel it when Zoe laughs, when she looks at me with those eyes that are so much like her mother's, when she says something so wise it takes my breath away. He finished the wine, surprising himself. The sky was just a place I went to find peace, but peace can be found anywhere if you know how to look for it. Victoria set down her empty glass. I don't know how to look for it. I don't think I ever learned. Then learn now. You've got time. Do I? Yesterday I almost died. But you didn't. You're here. You're breathing. You've got every day from now until the end to figure out what matters. Marcus turned to go back inside. That's more than a lot of people get. He paused at the balcony door. The funeral tomorrow. It's at 10 o'clock at a church near Westminster. You're welcome to come if you want. Colonel Wright always said the measure of a person isn't how many friends they have at the beginning. It's how many show up at the end. Victoria smiled. I'll be there. That night, Marcus dreamed of Denise. She was sitting on the edge of their bed, the way she used to before she got too weak. Her hair was full and beautiful the way it had been before the chemotherapy stole it. Her eyes were bright the way they had been before the pain dulled them. You did good today, she said. I don't know if I did the right thing. You saved 200 people, Marcus, including our daughter. How is that not the right thing? I promised you I'd stay safe, that I'd put down the warrior. Denise laughed, and the sound was like music. Baby, you didn't pick up the warrior again. You picked up the father, the protector. That's different. Is it? Of course it is. A warrior fights for glory, for country, for abstract things. A protector fights for the people he loves. There's nothing in the world more righteous than that. I miss you. I know, I miss you too. But you're doing so good, Marcus. You're raising our baby girl to be kind and brave and everything I ever hoped she'd be. That's all I ever wanted. Sometimes I don't know if I can keep doing this alone. Denise smiled, and there was something in her eyes he couldn't quite read. Who said anything about alone? Marcus woke up with tears on his face. The room was dark. Zoe was still asleep beside him, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of childhood dreams. He lay there for a long time staring at the ceiling, thinking about Denise's words. Who said anything about alone? He didn't know what it meant. But somewhere deep in his chest, in the place where hope and fear lived side by side, something stirred, something that felt like possibility. End of part 3. Part 4. Lưu ý viết 4 mẹn từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi. Không mô tả canh tăng cường hành động và đối thoại, dám mô tả tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lấn man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn, không nhảy sang mục document. 0911 Orchestrated Seamless Narrative, Continuation with Emotional Depth and Dialogue-Driven Storytelling. The user wants me to write part 4 of the story, continuing seamlessly from part 3. They want 4,000 words. Seamless connection with previous parts. Mix of dialogue to create a cohesive story. No reintroduction of the story at the beginning. Smooth transitions between parts. Maintain the theme. No abrupt breaks. No bullet points or subheadings. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, and relatable tone. No scene descriptions increase action and dialogue. Reduce descriptions. Focus on emotional action and character psychology. Third-person narration. Keep dramatic tension without rambling. Don't introduce the next part at the end. Reply in message, not document. Let me continue the story from where part 3 ended. Marcus had a dream about Denise, and the funeral for Colonel Wright is the next morning. Victoria said she would come to the funeral. Part 4 should cover the funeral for Colonel Wright, more character development, the resolution of Marcus's internal conflict, Victoria's transformation continuing, building toward the conclusion. I'll write this in a way that flows naturally from part 3 and sets up part 5, the breakthrough conclusion. Part 4, the final salute. The church was smaller than Marcus expected. He had imagined something grand for Colonel Wright's farewell, a military cathedral with flags and honor guards, and the kind of pomp that befitted a man who had served his country for 40 years. Instead, it was a modest stone building on a quiet street, the kind of place that had been standing for centuries and would stand for centuries more. "Is this it, Daddy?" Zoe asked, holding his hand as they walked up the worn steps. "This is it, baby girl. It's pretty. I like the flowers." Marcus looked at the arrangements flanking the entrance. Simple white lilies, Colonel Wright's favorite according to his widow. The same flowers that had been at Denise's funeral, though Marcus hadn't planned that connection. Victoria was waiting near the door, dressed in black, looking uncomfortable in a way that had nothing to do with her clothing. "I wasn't sure if I should actually come," she admitted. "I didn't know the man. I feel like an intruder." "You're not an intruder. You're a guest." Marcus guided Zoe toward the entrance. Besides, Colonel Wright would have appreciated a full house. He always said empty pews meant you hadn't lived right. They entered together, and Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle onto his shoulders. The church was nearly full. Men and women in uniform, some with silver hair and weathered faces, others young and sharp-eyed. Families with children. A few politicians Marcus recognized from news coverage. And in the front row, a small woman with white hair and a black dress sitting perfectly still. Margaret Wright, the colonel's wife of 43 years. Marcus had met her twice before. Once at his graduation from flight school, when she had hugged him and told him he was everything her husband had said he was. Once at Denise's funeral, when she had held his hand and said nothing because sometimes there were no words. He led Zoe down the aisle, Victoria following hesitantly behind. People turned to look. Some of them recognized him. He heard whispers caught fragments of conversation. "The pilot from the news. Saved 200 people. Colonel Wright's boy." That last one stopped him. Colonel Wright's boy. He had never thought of himself that way, but hearing it now, he understood. To everyone in this room, he was an extension of the man in the casket at the front of the church. A legacy. A living testament. He slid into a pew near the front, Zoe beside him, Victoria on the end. Margaret Wright turned slightly and caught his eye. She nodded once, a small gesture that carried decades of shared history. Marcus nodded back, not trusting his voice. The service began with a hymn that Marcus didn't know. He stood with everyone else holding the program with hands that were steadier than they should have been. Zoe tried to sing along, making up words when she didn't know them, her small voice earnest and off-key. The chaplain spoke first, a young man with kind eyes who had clearly never met Colonel Wright but had done his research. James Arthur Wright was born in 1949 in a small town in Georgia. The son of a sharecropper and a schoolteacher, he rose through adversity to become one of the most decorated officers in the United States Air Force. He flew combat missions in Vietnam, trained pilots during the Gulf War, and spent his final years mentoring the next generation of warriors. Marcus listened, but the words felt hollow. Statistics and dates couldn't capture who Colonel Wright really was. They couldn't explain the man who had sat with a terrified 17-year-old in a police station and seen something worth saving. They couldn't convey the voice that had pushed Marcus through countless moments of doubt and exhaustion and despair. The chaplain continued, but Marcus's mind drifted. He remembered the first time he had flown solo. The terror and exhilaration of being alone in the sky, responsible for a machine that could kill him in 100 different ways. He had landed shaking, convinced he had made a dozen mistakes, certain he wasn't good enough. Colonel Wright had been waiting on the tarmac. "Well," the old man had demanded. "How was it?" "I don't know if I'm cut out for this, sir." "Nobody's cut out for anything. We cut ourselves. We shape ourselves. We decide what we're going to be, and then we become it." Colonel Wright had put a hand on his shoulder. "You just flew an aircraft by yourself for the first time. Stop looking for reasons to fail. Start looking for reasons to succeed." Marcus had carried those words with him ever since, through training, through combat, through Denise's illness and death, through every moment when he wanted to give up. Stop looking for reasons to fail. Start looking for reasons to succeed. After the chaplain, others spoke. A general who had served with Colonel Wright in Vietnam. A congressman who had been one of his pilots. A woman who had been the first female aviator Colonel Wright had trained back when such things were still controversial. Each story painted a different picture of the same man. Tough, but fair. Demanding, but supportive. Impossible to please, but worth the effort. And then Margaret Wright stood. She walked to the podium slowly, her movements careful, but not frail. At 75, she still carried herself with the dignity of a military wife who had spent decades waiting for her husband to come home from places she couldn't name. "James and I were married for 43 years, she began. "In that time he buried more young men and women than I can count. pilots he had trained, officers he had mentored, friends who had become family. Each time a piece of him went into the ground with them. She paused, looking out at the congregation. But he never broke. He never stopped believing that the work mattered, that the sacrifice was worth it, that every young person who walked through his door deserved a chance to become something extraordinary. Her eyes found Marcus in the crowd. He talked about you, Marcus Johnson, right up until the end. He said you were the best of them. Not because you were the most talented, though Lord knows you were talented, but because you understood something the others didn't. You understood that the uniform doesn't make the man. The man makes the uniform. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. He blinked them back, jaw tight. When he heard about what happened on that plane, Margaret continued, he cried. For the first time in 30 years, I saw my husband weep. Not because he was surprised. He always knew you had it in you. He cried because he was proud, because everything he had poured into you had blossomed into something beautiful, because his legacy was flying even if he never would again. She wiped her own eyes, her composure finally cracking. James isn't really gone. He's in this room. He's in every pilot he trained, every life he touched, every person who is a little bit braver because he believed in them. She looked at Marcus again. He's in you, son. Don't ever forget that. Marcus couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They rolled down his cheeks, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Beside him, Zoe squeezed his hand. It's okay to cry, Daddy, she whispered. Mommy said tears are just love with nowhere else to go. He pulled her close and let himself grieve. After the service, there was a reception in the church hall. Marcus stood in a corner holding a cup of coffee. He didn't want accepting condolences from people he barely knew. Zoe had found a group of children to play with her natural resilience, allowing her to shift from funeral to fun with the ease of childhood. Victoria approached, looking uncertain. That was beautiful, she said. The service, his wife's speech, all of it. He was a beautiful man. I could tell. The way everyone talked about him. I've never had anyone speak about me that way. Maybe you will someday. Victoria smiled sadly. Maybe, if I can figure out how to be worth speaking about. You already made a start. By not dying on a plane. By calling your sister. By coming to a funeral for someone you didn't know. By standing in a room full of strangers because you wanted to support someone who was important to someone who was important to you. Victoria considered this. That's a lot of degrees of separation. Connection is connection. Doesn't matter how many degrees. An older man approached them, his uniform heavy with medals and decorations. Marcus recognized him immediately. General Thomas Harwell, one of Colonel Wright's closest friends and a legend in the Air Force. Colonel Johnson, the general said, extending his hand. Or should I say, hero of Flight 789. Just Marcus, sir. I'm not in the service anymore. Once a colonel, always a colonel. You know that better than anyone. Harwell's grip was firm despite his age. I saw the news. Damn fine flying. Thank you, sir, but Captain Morrison did most of the work. Don't be modest. I spoke to Morrison this morning. He said you talked him through the entire approach, said he would have lost the aircraft without you in that seat. Marcus shrugged. I did what needed to be done. Anyone would have. No, not anyone. That's what makes you special, son. Harwell's eyes were sharp. James always said you were the one who got away. The one who could have been the best of his generation. The one who chose family over glory. I chose my wife over a career. I'd make the same choice again. I know you would. That's why I'm here. Harwell reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. James asked me to give you this. He wrote it a month ago when he knew the end was coming. Marcus stared at the envelope. His name was written on the front in Colonel Wright's familiar scrawl. He said you'd know when to open it, Harwell continued. He said you'd need it when you were ready. Ready for what? Harwell smiled. That's between you and James. But I have a feeling you'll figure it out. The general shook his hand, once more nodded to Victoria, and walked away to rejoin the other mourners. Marcus held the envelope, feeling the weight of words he hadn't yet read. They left the reception an hour later. Zoe was tired, dragging her feet as they walked back toward the car Victoria had arranged. The day had been long, emotionally exhausting, and Marcus felt every minute of it in his bones. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" "It's 11 in the morning, baby girl. So ice cream doesn't have a time. That's what Mommy said." Marcus laughed despite everything. Mommy said a lot of things that weren't exactly rules. But she was right. She was always right. He couldn't argue with that. They found a small shop a few blocks from the church. Zoe got strawberry. Marcus got coffee. Victoria, after much hesitation, got chocolate. "I can't remember the last time I ate ice cream," she admitted, taking a tentative bite. "My nutritionist would have a heart attack." "Your nutritionist isn't here," Marcus said. "No, she's not." Victoria took another bite, bigger this time. "You know what? This is delicious. Why did I ever give this up?" "Because someone told you it was bad for you. Because someone told me everything enjoyable was bad for me. Pleasure equals weakness. That was the family motto." Sounds like a terrible family. It was, is. Victoria sighed. Although maybe it doesn't have to be. I spoke to my sister again this morning. We talked for an hour. She told me about her children, her husband, her life, all the things I missed while I was building my empire. How did it feel? Painful, but also good, like lancing a wound. It hurts, but you know it's necessary for healing. Zoe looked up from her ice cream. "When I hurt myself, Daddy puts a Band-Aid on it and kisses it better. Maybe you need someone to kiss it better." Victoria laughed, surprised. "Maybe I do, sweetheart, although I'm not sure who that would be." "You could kiss yourself, in a mirror. That's what I do when I can't find Daddy." Marcus choked on his coffee. "Zoe, where did you learn that?" "From me, Daddy. I made it up. It works, though. You should try it, Miss Victoria." Victoria smiled at the little girl with something that looked like wonder. "You know what I just might." That afternoon, while Zoe napped at the hotel, Marcus sat on the balcony with the envelope in his hands. He had been carrying it since the funeral, afraid to open it, afraid of what Colonel Wright's final words might say. Would it be advice? Criticism? A list of expectations Marcus could never live up to? Or would it be goodbye? A real final permanent goodbye? He wasn't sure he was ready for either. But Margaret had said Colonel Wright wrote it when he knew the end was coming. That meant the old man had been thinking about Marcus in his final days. Had wanted to say something that couldn't wait for heaven. Marcus tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, the letters slightly uneven from a hand weakened by illness. "Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't waste time grieving. I've had a good life, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. I need to tell you something I should have said years ago, but never found the words for. Something I realized when you left the Air Force to be with Denise. You didn't disappoint me. I know you think you did. I know you think I expected you to become a general to lead squadrons to carry my legacy into the future. And maybe I did expect that once upon a time. But when you walked away from everything you had built to hold your wife's hand while she died, I understood something I had spent 40 years missing. You were never meant to be my legacy. You were meant to be better than me. I gave my life to the Air Force. I sacrificed my marriage, my health, my relationships, all on the altar of duty and honor. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself I was serving something greater than myself. But you knew what I never learned. The greatest service isn't to a country or an institution. It's to the people you love. It's being present. It's holding hands. It's choosing bedtime stories over briefing rooms. That's not weakness, son. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen anyone do. I hear you're still working as a maintenance technician. Still staying close to home. Still putting Zoe first. Good. Keep doing that. But don't forget who you are. You were born to fly, Marcus, not just aircraft. You were born to soar. When the time is right, and you'll know when that is, spread your wings again. Not for me, not for the Air Force, for yourself, for the boy who used to climb onto rooftops and dream of the clouds. He's still in there. Don't let him die. I'll be watching from wherever I end up, probably yelling at you to check your instruments and maintain proper altitude. Old habits die hard. Fly high, son. And when you land, go home to that beautiful daughter of yours and tell her that her grandfather loves her. Because that's what you are to me. The son I never had. Colonel James Arthur Wright. P.S. I left something for Zoe in my will. A model of an F-22, the one I had on my desk. Give it to her when she's older and tell her it belonged to the man who believed in her father before anyone else did. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Each time the words hit him differently. The first time, he cried. The second time, he felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had been carrying for years. The third time, he understood. He had been hiding, not just from the sky, but from himself. Telling himself that being a good father meant being small, meant staying safe, meant giving up everything that made him who he was. But Colonel Wright was right. You couldn't teach your child to fly if you had forgotten how to spread your own wings. Victoria found him still on the balcony, the letter in his lap, staring at the sky. Are you okay? I don't know. Maybe. For the first time in a while, maybe. She sat down across from him. What did he say, if you don't mind me asking? He said I was his son. He said I was the strongest person he knew. He said I need to start flying again. Marcus laughed, but it was thick with emotion. He told me I was meant to soar. Then why aren't you? Because I'm scared. Because the last time I took a risk, I lost Denise. Because I promised her I'd stay safe, and I convinced myself that staying safe meant staying small. But you didn't stay small on that plane. You saved everyone. That was different. That was survival. I had to act. Did you? Victoria leaned forward. Or did you choose to act? You could have stayed in your seat, could have let someone else step up. But you didn't. You walked into that cockpit because something inside you wouldn't let you sit still. Marcus was quiet. When I was in business school, Victoria continued, they taught us about risk analysis, calculating the probability of success versus failure, making decisions based on numbers and projections. I was very good at it, probably the best in my class. And it's all garbage. Numbers don't account for courage. Projections don't factor in love. The biggest risks I ever took, the ones that built my empire, weren't calculated. They were leaps of faith. I don't have faith in much anymore. You have faith in Zoe, in being a good father, in keeping your promises. Victoria stood up. Maybe it's time to have faith in yourself again. She walked back inside, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The sun was setting over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The same colors he used to chase at 30,000 feet. The same beauty he had tried to touch 1,000 times, always falling short. He thought about Denise's dream, about her words. Who said anything about alone? He thought about Colonel Wright's letter. Spread your wings again. Not for me, for yourself. He thought about Zoe sleeping inside, trusting him to build a life worth living. And slowly, carefully, like a man testing whether he still remembered how to walk. Marcus began to imagine a future where he was more than just a maintenance technician, more than just a single father, more than just a man hiding from the sky, a future where he flew again. Zoe woke up demanding dinner. They found a restaurant near the hotel, a pub with wooden tables and comfortable noise. Marcus ordered fish and chips. Zoe ordered a burger that was bigger than her head. Victoria ordered a salad, then changed her mind and got the same thing as Marcus. I'm done eating like a bird, she announced. Life is too short for sad salads. That should be on a t-shirt, Marcus said. Maybe I'll make it my company's new motto. Ashford Technologies. Life is too short for sad salads. Zoe giggled. That's silly. Silly is underrated. Victoria took a bite of fish. I spent so long being serious, being impressive, being everything my father wanted me to be. I forgot how to be silly. I can teach you, Zoe offered. I'm really good at silly. I believe you. You told me to kiss my own face in a mirror. It works. I'm sure it does, sweetheart. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The restaurant was filling up couples and families and groups of friends celebrating the ordinary miracle of being alive. Marcus watched Zoe struggle with her burger and felt a wave of love so intense it almost hurt. Hey, baby girl. Yeah, Daddy. I need to tell you something. Zoe put down her burger, sensing the shift in his tone. What is it? Colonel Wright left you something in his will. A model airplane. An F-22 like the one Daddy used to fly. He wanted me to give it to you when you're older, but I think you're old enough now. Zoe's eyes widened. He left me a present, but I never met him. He knew you through me. I told him all about you. Your drawings, your questions, the way you remember everything Mommy said. Marcus reached out and tucked a stray braid behind her ear. He said you were special. He wanted you to have something to remember him by. Wow. Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing. So Colonel Wright is like a grandpa I never met. Something like that. He was like a father to me. So I guess that makes him like a grandfather to you. I wish I could have met him. Me too, baby girl. But you know what he's watching, just like Mommy. And when you look at that model airplane, you can think about him and all the things he taught me. You'll know him through the stories. Zoe considered this. Can you tell me a story now about Colonel Wright? Marcus smiled. Yeah, I can do that. And there, in a London pub surrounded by strangers who had no idea they were in the presence of a hero, Marcus began to tell his daughter about the man who had saved his life. Victoria listened, not speaking, but present. Her eyes glistened as Marcus described a terrified teenager transformed into a warrior, a lost boy given purpose, a man taught to believe in himself. By the time the story was over, their plates were empty, and Zoe was barely keeping her eyes open. Time for bed, Marcus said. One more story. Tomorrow, baby girl, we have a long flight home. Promise. Promise. He carried her back to the hotel, her head on his shoulder, her breathing slow and even. Victoria walked beside them, quiet, but somehow not distant. At the door to her room, she paused. What are you going to do? She asked. When you get back to Chicago? Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, at the letter still folded in his pocket, at the sky he could see through the hallway window. I don't know yet, but I think it's time to find out. Victoria nodded. For what it's worth, I think Colonel Wright was right. You were meant to soar. Thanks. And for what it's even more worth, I'd like to stay in touch, if that's okay. I know we come from different worlds, but I think maybe we have something to learn from each other. Marcus considered the offer. 2 days ago, he would have refused, would have retreated into his comfortable isolation and told himself he didn't need anyone. But things were different now. He was different. I'd like that, he said. Victoria smiled. It was the most genuine expression he had seen on her face. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Victoria. She disappeared into her room and Marcus carried Zoe into theirs. Tomorrow they would fly home, back to Chicago, back to their small apartment and their quiet life, back to the routine that had kept them safe for 3 years. But something had shifted, something fundamental. And Marcus knew with a certainty he hadn't felt in years that their small life was about to get bigger. He just didn't know how yet. 6 months passed like water through open fingers. Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting a tie he hadn't worn since Denise's funeral. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. Daddy, you look handsome. He turned to see Zoe standing in the doorway wearing the new dress Victoria had sent for the occasion. Purple with silver stars. Zoe had insisted on wearing it every day since it arrived, and Marcus had finally convinced her to save it for today. You think so? Mommy would think so too. She always said you looked best in blue. Marcus looked down at his tie. Blue. He hadn't consciously chosen it, but there it was. You ready? He asked. I've been ready for 100 years. It's only been 6 months. That's like 100 years when you're 7. He laughed and took her hand. Fair enough. Let's go. The auditorium at O'Hare was packed. Marcus had expected a small ceremony, a few handshakes, a certificate, maybe a photo op. Instead, he walked into a room filled with hundreds of people. Airline executives, military officials, reporters with cameras. And in the front row, a familiar face that made his heart skip. Victoria Ashford sat between Captain Arthur Morrison and Margaret Wright, all three of them beaming like proud parents at a graduation. Daddy, there's Miss Victoria. I see her baby girl. Can I go sit with her? After the ceremony. Right now you need to come with me. They made their way to the front of the room where a podium had been set up with the logos of the airline, the FAA, and the Air Force. Marcus felt every eye tracking his movement, and for once he didn't mind. This time, they weren't looking at him with judgment or suspicion. They were looking at him with respect. The ceremony began with a speech from the airline's CEO, a man Marcus had never met, but who spoke about him as if they were old friends. 6 months ago, Marcus Johnson was a passenger on Flight 789, a humble maintenance technician traveling with his daughter to attend a funeral. He could have stayed in his seat. He could have let fear paralyze him. Instead, he walked into a cockpit and saved 226 lives. Applause filled the room. Marcus kept his eyes on Zoe, drawing strength from her small, encouraging smile. Today, we're not just honoring Marcus for his heroism on that flight. We're welcoming him back to where he belongs. After 3 years away from the cockpit, after sacrificing his career to care for his family, Marcus Johnson has completed his recertification. He is once again a licensed commercial pilot. More applause, louder this time. And it is my honor to announce that Marcus will be joining our training division, where he will help prepare the next generation of pilots, not just to fly, but to lead, to make the impossible decisions, to be heroes when the moment demands it. The CEO turned to Marcus. Colonel Johnson, would you like to say a few words? Marcus hadn't prepared anything. He had assumed this would be a quiet affair, a formality. But as he looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who believed in him, at the daughter who had given him a reason to keep going, at the woman who had started as an enemy and become something like a friend, he found the words came easily. 6 months ago, I thought my flying days were over. I thought the best thing I could do for my daughter was to stay small, stay safe, stay invisible. He paused, letting the memory of that plane ride wash over him. But someone taught me that staying safe doesn't mean staying small. Being a good father doesn't mean giving up who you are. It means showing your children what courage looks like. What it means to fall down and get back up. What it means to chase your dreams even when you're scared. His voice caught slightly, but he pushed through. My wife Denise used to say that love makes you brave. My daughter Zoe reminds me of that every single day. And Colonel James Wright, the man whose funeral I was traveling to when that plane started falling, he taught me that the only thing worse than failing is never trying at all. Marcus looked directly at Zoe. So I tried. I went back to school. I studied. I tested. I sat in simulators until my eyes ached. And every time I wanted to quit, I remembered the faces of the people on that plane, the ones who trusted me to bring them home, the ones who believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. He straightened his shoulders. I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who loves his daughter and a pilot who loves the sky. But if my story can inspire anyone else to stop hiding from their dreams, to stop making themselves small, to remember who they really are, then everything I went through was worth it." The applause that followed was deafening. After the ceremony, the crowd swarmed Marcus with handshakes and congratulations. He accepted each one graciously, but his eyes kept drifting to the front row where Zoe was now sitting in Victoria's lap, chattering excitedly about everything and nothing. Finally, he made his way over. "So," Victoria said, standing up with Zoe still holding her hand. "How does it feel to be official? Terrifying, exhilarating. I'm not sure which one is winning." "That sounds about right," she smiled. "I'm proud of you, Marcus, for what it's worth." "It's worth a lot." Margaret Wright stepped forward, her eyes glistening. "James would have given anything to be here today. He talked about this moment, you know. He always believed you'd find your way back to the sky." "I wouldn't be here without him." "Yes, you would. You just might have taken longer to figure it out." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. This was his. He wanted Zoe to have it, but I think you should hold on to it for now. Give it to her when she's ready. Marcus opened the box. Inside was a pair of aviator wings, the kind pilots received upon completing their training. They were old, worn, polished countless times over the decades. "These were his first wings," Margaret explained, "from 1971. He said they were the most precious thing he owned because they represented the moment he stopped being a scared kid from Georgia and became something more." Marcus closed the box carefully. "I'll keep them safe." "I know you will." Margaret hugged him, surprisingly strong for her age. "Now go celebrate with your family. You've earned it." They went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the airport. It had become their tradition over the past 6 months. Every Sunday, Marcus and Zoe would meet Victoria for pasta and conversation. What had started as an awkward obligation had evolved into something genuine. Tonight, Captain Morrison joined them along with his wife, a gentle woman named Helen, who fussed over Zoe like a grandmother. "I still can't believe you did it," Morrison said, raising his glass. 6 months to recertify. That's faster than most people do it fresh out of school." "I had good motivation." "You had insane motivation. Most people would have taken the interviews, the book deals, the speaking circuit. You turned all of it down and went back to school." Marcus shrugged. "Fame doesn't pay the bills, and it definitely doesn't set a good example for Zoe." "Speaking of bills," Victoria interjected, "how's the new apartment?" Marcus smiled. "It's great. Zoe has her own room for the first time. We can actually fit a dining table." "I helped pick the curtains," Zoe announced proudly. "They're yellow like sunshine." "Yellow is a very good choice," Helen Morrison said. "Cheerful." That's what Mommy would have said. She loved yellow. The table went quiet for a moment, the way it always did when Zoe mentioned Denise. Not uncomfortable, but reverent, acknowledging the absence without letting it overshadow the presence. "Your mother had excellent taste," Victoria said finally, "in curtains and in husbands." Marcus felt his face warm. "That's not, I mean. Daddy's blushing," Zoe shrieked with delight. "Miss Victoria made Daddy blush." "I didn't mean," Victoria started, but she was laughing too. "I just meant—" "Let it go," Morrison advised, grinning. "You're only making it worse." The laughter that followed filled the restaurant, drawing curious glances from other diners. But no one at the table cared. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was part of something. Not just a father and daughter surviving together, but a family. A strange, unexpected, cobbled-together family that made no sense on paper, but worked perfectly in reality. Later that night, after Zoe was asleep, Marcus sat on the balcony of their new apartment and opened Colonel Wright's letter again. He had read it 100 times since London, memorized every word. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, the words didn't just comfort him. They challenged him. "Spread your wings again. Not for me, for yourself. For the boy who used to climb onto rooftops and dream of the clouds." He had done it. He had spread his wings. He was flying again professionally, officially, legally. In a month, he would be standing in front of a classroom of aspiring pilots, teaching them everything Colonel Wright had taught him. But was that enough? Was that really spreading his wings? Or was it just a different way of staying close to the ground? His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "I have a proposal. Don't say no until you hear me out. Call me tomorrow." Marcus stared at the message, curious but wary. Victoria's proposals had a tendency to be dramatic. He typed back, "Should I be worried?" Her response came immediately. "Only if you're still afraid of flying." Victoria's proposal arrived the next morning in the form of a video call. She was sitting in what looked like an airport terminal, her hair slightly windblown, her usual corporate polish replaced by something more casual. "Are you traveling again?" Marcus asked. "Just got off a flight from Vermont. Spent the week with my sister's family." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "Did you know that kids under 10 wake up at obscene hours? I'm exhausted. Welcome to my life. I have newfound respect for single parents everywhere." She paused. "Speaking of which, that's what I want to talk to you about. Single parenting. In a way." Victoria took a breath. "I'm starting a foundation. The Right Way Foundation. Named after Colonel Wright with Margaret's blessing. It's going to provide scholarships and support for children of single parents who want to pursue careers in aviation." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Victoria, I want you to be the director of the training program. Part-time, of course. You'll still have your job with the airline. But the foundation needs someone who understands what these kids are facing. Someone who can be the Colonel Wright for the next generation. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Or say no. But don't say maybe. I've heard enough maybes in boardrooms to last a lifetime." Marcus thought about it. About the kids who were growing up like he had without fathers, without guidance, without anyone to tell them they were capable of more than the world expected. About the chance to give them what Colonel Wright had given him. "Yes," he said. Victoria's smile widened. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. Because I already had the paperwork drawn up." "Of course you did. I'm a CEO. Planning is what I do." She hesitated. "There's one more thing." "What?" "The foundation's first major donor wants to meet you. She's actually the person who inspired the whole thing." "Who is it?" Victoria turned her camera to show the woman sitting beside her in the terminal. It was Margaret Wright. "Hello, Marcus," the older woman said, her voice warm. "I hope you don't mind me ambushing you like this." Victoria insisted on the dramatic reveal. "Mrs. Wright, James left me more money than I know what to do with," Margaret interrupted. "And I've been trying to figure out the best way to honor his legacy." Then Victoria came to me with this idea, and I knew immediately it was right. It's what James would have wanted. Young people getting the chances he gave you. Learning to fly not just airplanes but themselves. Marcus felt tears threatening. He blinked them back. "I don't deserve this." "You deserve exactly this," Margaret said firmly. "You've spent 3 years thinking you walked away from your destiny. But you didn't walk away. You walked towards something else. Something harder. Something braver. And now it's time to bring those two paths together." Marcus thought about Denise, about her words in his dream. Who said anything about alone? He thought about Zoe, about her unshakable faith in him. He thought about Colonel Wright, about the letter, about the wings waiting to be passed on. "When do we start?" he asked. Victoria and Margaret exchanged a look that was pure triumph. "Tomorrow," Victoria said. "We start tomorrow." 1 year later. Marcus stood in front of a classroom of 20 students, their faces a mix of nervousness and determination. They came from every background imaginable: foster kids, children of single mothers, teenagers, who had been told their whole lives that the sky was not for people like them. "Before we begin," Marcus said, "I want to tell you a story." He had told this story many times now. It never got easier. But it also never stopped mattering. 3 years ago I was on a plane with my daughter. Business class, which I could barely afford, and a woman looked at me like I was dirt, like I didn't belong, like my presence was an offense to her expensive champagne and designer dress. The students leaned forward, engaged. That same woman, when the engines failed and the plane started falling, grabbed my hand and begged me to save her life. A murmur ran through the room. I could have let my anger guide me, could have remembered every look, every whisper, every assumption people made about me based on my skin and my clothes and my bank account. But I didn't. I walked into that cockpit and I saved 226 people. Not because they deserved it, not because they had earned it, but because that's what pilots do. We don't choose who we save, we just save. He paused, letting the words sink in. The woman who mocked me is now one of my closest friends. She started this foundation. She gave millions of dollars so that you could be sitting in these chairs today. Because people can change. Situations can change. You can change. He looked at each of them, meeting their eyes. The world is going to tell you that you don't belong in the sky, that the sky is for other people, richer people, different people. And you're going to want to believe them. You're going to want to give up. He smiled. Don't. The graduation ceremony for the first class of Right Way Foundation scholars was held at O'Hare in the same auditorium where Marcus had received his own recertification. This time he wasn't receiving an award. He was giving one. Our first graduate, Marcus announced, is Jamal Washington, 17 years old. Raised by his grandmother in Chicago's South Side. When he applied to this program, he wrote that he used to climb onto his apartment roof and watch planes fly overhead, dreaming of being up there. Jamal walked across the stage, his eyes shining. He shook Marcus's hand with a grip that trembled slightly. I know that rooftop, Marcus said quietly, so only Jamal could hear. I used to climb one just like it. Jamal nodded, too emotional to speak. You're going to be great, Marcus continued. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I won't, sir. I promise. Marcus handed him his certificate along with something else, a small velvet box. What's this? Open it later, when you're alone. They belong to someone who believed in kids like us. Now, they belong to you. Inside the box were Colonel Wright's original aviator wings. After the ceremony, Zoe found Marcus in the crowd. At 8 years old, she was taller now, her face losing the roundness of early childhood. But her eyes were the same. Denise's eyes. Full of love and mischief and wisdom beyond her years. You gave away the wings, she said. Yeah. I thought those were for me. Marcus knelt down so they were eye to eye. They were for you to have. But they're also for you to give away. That's what makes them special. They're not meant to stay in one place. They're meant to pass from person to person, carrying the message forward. What message? That everyone deserves a chance to fly, no matter where they come from, no matter what people think of them, no matter how scared they are. Zoe considered this. So Jamal will give them to someone else someday. Exactly. And that person will give them to someone else. And on forever. That's beautiful, Daddy. Your mother would have said the same thing. Zoe hugged him fierce and tight. She's proud of you. I know she is. I know she is too, baby girl. I know she is too. That night, Marcus sat on the balcony of their apartment, looking up at the sky. The stars were hidden by city lights, but he knew they were there. Just like he knew Denise was watching. And Colonel Wright, and everyone else who had believed in him when he had stopped believing in himself. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. 22 graduates, 22 future pilots. Not bad for our first year. He typed back, not bad at all. How's Vermont beautiful? Chaotic. My nephew threw up on my designer shoes. I've never been happier. Marcus laughed. The Victoria he had met on that plane would never have tolerated such an indignity. The Victoria he knew now considered it a badge of honor. Get some sleep, he texted. Big year ahead. You too. And Marcus? Yeah, thank you. For everything. He set down the phone and looked back at the sky. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more students to teach, more dreams to nurture, more lives to change. But tonight there was just this: a father and daughter safe in their home, a legacy being carried forward, a promise kept, and a new one beginning. Marcus closed his eyes and remembered Denise's last words to him, whispered in a hospital room that smelled of flowers and endings. "Don't forget how to fly, baby. Promise me. Don't ever forget how to fly." He hadn't forgotten. He never would. Because heroes don't wear capes or uniforms. Sometimes they wear faded jackets and carry unicorn backpacks. Sometimes they start as scared kids on rooftops dreaming of clouds. Sometimes they save planes full of people who never expected salvation from someone who looked like him. And sometimes the best times they pass their wings to the next generation and watch them soar. Marcus Johnson had kept every promise he ever made. To his wife, to his daughter, to the man who saved him, and now finally to himself. The sky was waiting, and he was ready to fly. Heroes aren't born in moments of glory. They're built in years of sacrifice shaped by love and revealed when the world needs them most. The measure of a person isn't what they accumulate, but what they're willing to give away. Not the heights they reach, but the hands they extend to help others climb. And sometimes the greatest flight isn't the one that saves 200 lives. It's the one that teaches a single child they were always meant to soar.